Good evening, good evening, good evening, Pride Center family. I am Nick Zantoff, and I'm the Pride Center's marketing coordinator, and I'm really happy that you're all able to join us tonight. In just a few moments, our COO, Christopher Fegenbush, will be interviewing attorneys from Legal Aid about your rights in relation to landlord-tenant law, mortgages, and foreclosures. Now, before I turn things over, I wanted to say that we're really happy that we get to connect with you virtually still. As a reminder, the center's physical space is currently closed, but all of our staff members are working remotely. You can find our staff directory on our website at pridecenterflorida.org, or you can call us at 954-463-9005 to get in touch with us. Even though we really miss being able to get together in person, we will be hosting live streaming events just like this one every week here on Facebook. Some of our upcoming Pride Center virtual events include each Monday at 11 a.m. We'll be doing Facebook Live updates from Lorenzo Robertson, the Prevention Intervention Coordinator here at the center. And then on Tuesdays, it's everyone's favorite 11 a.m. coffee and conversation with Bruce Williams. And then this coming Wednesday, we'll be doing a tour of the residences at Equality Park at 1 p.m. with our CEO, Robert Boo. On Thursdays at 11 a.m., we'll be having Facebook Live updates from Tatiana Williams, the Testing and Community Mobilization Coordinator at the center. And then this Saturday, April 18th at 5 p.m., it is National Transgender HIV Testing Day, and we'll be hearing a few words from Tatiana Williams. And now I'm excited to turn things over to the host for the evening, Christopher Fegenbush, Pride Center COO.
Good evening, folks. It's really nice to have you here. What you may not know behind the scenes is that one of our lead attorneys with Coast to Coast just lost access to internet, and I think that we're getting her back on. Do we see her? I think she's coming in.
I think so.
Alicia will be joining us in just a minute. So I'm really glad that you chose to spend your next bit of your evening with us. I'm sure you could be doing lots of other things right now, and it means a lot that you're with us. As Nick said, I am the COO of the Pride Center at Equality Park, and our mission statement at the Pride Center is we provide a welcoming, safe space, an inclusive home that celebrates, nurtures, and empowers the LGBTQ plus communities and our friends and neighbors in South Florida. So if you consider yourself, if you self-identify as anywhere on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, or if you're a friend, family member, neighbor of someone that would self-identify as LGBTQ+, if you're one of our allies, please know you're welcome here, and this is your home, and we're glad that you're spending this time with us. And I want to focus tonight our attention on that word, home. During this pandemic, many of us are dealing with worries and anxieties and fears and stressors, real ones. And we want to provide a forum tonight to get accurate, reliable, good information from skilled attorneys so that we know more. And our ultimate goal is that that knowledge and the time that we spend together here will help lower our individual and collective stressors. So that's our idea tonight, is we want you to leave here tonight empowered with knowledge, and we want you to leave here empowered with internal fortitude and strength and peace by our time spent together. So I'm really thankful for Legal Aid of Broward and Coast to Coast Legal and the Broward Human Rights Initiative, Rainbow Justice, for being a part of this evening. So before we get started, I have a request for anyone out there watching. This is for me as much as it is for our guest attorneys. Close your eyes for a second. Take a deep breath. Exhale. One more time. I want you to breathe in, and we're going to release our stressors. So breathe in for a moment. And exhale. Thanks for joining us tonight. April is Fair Housing Month, and we did want to be able to gather these amazing attorneys together to help provide us some information. So we'll talk more about the format in just a minute, but before we go any further, I want you to get to know our panelists tonight. So I'm gonna have them introduce themselves, and I'm gonna put them on the spot a little bit. I will tell you right now, Alicia and Kara, hate having to talk about themselves. So this is putting them in a very uncomfortable position, and I'm taking a perverse delight in that. But I want each of the attorneys to introduce themselves, tell us just a little bit about themselves professionally, and then just so you can know them personally a little bit. During this time of physical distancing, what has been your personal comfort food? What has been that little coping food, if you've been able to have access to that food, that when stressed or when worried, you've gone to use as your little comfort food? That'll be our little question to keep it personal tonight. So let's meet our panelists. Alicia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. I'll start with the comfort food because since my internet crashed at the moment we were going live, I kind of want my comfort food of dark chocolate. I could really use that right now. But yes, so I'm back. I think I'm here. If not, I'll jump back on with my phone, but you know, always the technology, but still good. And thank you to the Pride Center for doing this. My name is Alicia Herwood. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Coast to Coast Legal Aid. And I've spent my entire legal career in the areas of social justice and public interest. And for the last 7 years, I've worked at Legal Aid and Coast to Coast, and primarily in housing rights, with a particular focus with the HIV community, the LGBTQ, seniors, and veterans.
Thank you. And Alicia, I think you just were appointed to the board of directors of Poverello, our next door neighbors.
Yes, I was just appointed at the end of 2019 to the board of directors for Poverello.
Amazing partner organization of ours, and we're so proud of the really, really challenging and vital work they're doing right now. So thanks for your service on the board.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be a part of it.
Thank you. Kevin.
Christopher,
Yourself,
thank you for putting this together and for allowing me to be part of this platform and this presentation. And of course, thank you to Alicia and Kara for thinking of me. Good evening, everybody. My name's Kevin Rajabali. I'm a consumer rights and consumer protection attorney at the law offices of Sharman and Sharman. That's spelled with an SH, not CH like the toilet paper, unfortunately, which is a bit of a commodity now. I started at Legal Aid in 2013, and I was there till the end of 2016, working in different departments. One of them was with Alicia, and it focused on tenant rights, homeowners' rights if they were being foreclosed, and then eventually I got into a lot of debt collection defense, and that's where I was able to file I filed my first lawsuit against a debt collector, which is a lot of fun and something I really love doing. So a lot of what our practice focuses on is putting the consumer back in a position of power. So instead of always having to deal with a lawsuit, you're the one on the offensive. So if somebody tries to collect the debt in a way that's abusive, misleading, harassing, unfair as is defined by the law, we go after them. And also a lot of what we do deals with credit reporting. So think of Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And I'll get into that a little bit later as far as the CARES Act goes. But essentially that's what I do. And as far as comfort food goes, my favorite is always going to be pizza because you can always get more than one. I love burgers, but I'm not going to eat 5 burgers in a sitting. Okay. 5 slices of pizza, absolutely. So pizza, without a doubt.
Thanks, Kevin. I agree. Pizza is a really good choice. I want to point out to our viewers as well, Kara and Alicia and I all work for nonprofit organizations, but you are here doing pro bono work without pay as an attorney. And I really want to thank you for taking your time to be with us this evening. I want to thank your firm for having you here. It really means a lot to us. So thanks for taking your time and doing that.
My honor and my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. And then my buddy for many, many years, I was joking earlier that I think we have known each other and have worked as collaborators since we were baby fetuses. But Kara, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Sure, thank you. I am Kara Schakowsky. I am a supervising attorney at Legal Aid Service of Broward County, where I've spent my entire legal career. Like Alicia, it's my focus has been on social justice and public interest law. I'm even before law school. The last 13 years, I've been managing units at Legal Aid that specifically assist persons living with HIV and the LGBTQ community. We have an HIV law project. This particular workshop or clinic today is through our Rainbow Justice Project. And like Christopher said, I don't really like talking about myself, so I'll move on to my comfort food. You know, I just love a good crispy piece of celery, right? No, just kidding. Mac and cheese. Mac and cheese is my comfort food, and I could use some right now.
That is my 9-year-old's comfort food as well. So I made him a huge batch of it on Monday night that he's eating for every meal right now.
Good guy.
So I want to just talk for a second about the format tonight. And Kara, you and I can tag team a little bit about this, but I'm going to be asking questions to the attorneys that came into the Pride Center and to Legal Aid and to Coast to Coast. Because these attorneys are video in on Zoom, they're not going to be able to see your Facebook comments during the clinic. So we've gotten these questions that have come into the Pride Center, Legal Aid, and Coast to Coast. Nick will try to keep an eye on the comments, and at the end, if there's some specific ones that we can answer, we'll put it out there. But I just want to remind you, and I'd love for you to say more about this, Kara, is that specific legal advice for your particular case is not going to be provided tonight. We can't talk about your specific case in order to protect attorney-client privilege. What more might you want to say about that, Kara?
Yeah, just because we're lawyers, the little legal disclaimer. These are question and answers about specific legal information, specifically on housing rights. That's covering landlord-tenant issues, both for the landlord and for the tenant, mortgage issues. We have some bonus consumer law thanks to our guest pro bono attorney here. And it's all specific to the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, we could talk about housing law just generally forever, but this is specific to what's going on currently. There's going to be a lot of information about the resources that are available to people out there, and specifically the recent governor's order. There's a lot to parse through with that. So we want to make sure, we want to try to clear up anything if there's any kind of misconceptions. We just want the facts out there. So again, as Christopher said, it's not specific legal advice. We don't want to violate any attorney-client privilege. If you do have specific legal questions that we didn't address tonight, we're going to put up some emails and some phone numbers at the end. I'll try to get on Facebook and put those in the comments so you have them. Just to throw them out real quick, 954-736-2431. That's if you're calling after all of this is over and you have some additional questions. Oh, almost.
It's working. I'm trying. We'll have to try later. I was trying to write.
We'll definitely get the info to everybody. We also do have an email because I know a lot of people prefer email, and I'm one of them too. We have a specific email account for that Rainbow Justice project that I'd mentioned. It's LGBTQ Summit, SUMMIT, at legalaid.org. So again, we won't see the Facebook comments and questions while we're doing this. The questions that we are answering came from you all, people that called into Legal Aid Coast to Coast and the Pride Center. And then if you do have more specific questions, please email us or call us for additional info.
Thanks, Kara.
Sure.
So please know as we go through tonight, there may be resources that are getting mentioned or getting shared by different folks. We will post those in the comment section and we'll post them on the Pride Center Facebook page. So if you miss anything, know that we're going to post those later. So with no further ado, how about I get into some questions? And I just want our viewers to know we are going to be looking specifically at questions for tenants, for landlords, for personal mortgage holders. We're going to cover the gamut. So don't worry. If you haven't heard your question yet, hang on, and we'll ensure that you do. So I guess first question that I would ask is, these are some of the questions that came in. Should I pay my rent during the COVID-19 crisis?
Okay, I guess that'll go to me then, Christopher. And that is probably the most common question that we have received in our offices about it is, well, I don't have my job, or I have a loss of income. What do I do? Do I have to pay my rent? And the short answer to that is yes, your rent is still coming due. You may not have it, but that doesn't relieve you of the obligation under your lease to pay your rent.
Thank you, Alicia. A follow-up question on that. If I don't pay my rent for the next couple of months, does that mean I eventually need to pay what I owe?
Okay, good follow-up, Christopher. So I would explain it this way, is that your rent still comes due. Right now, there is a moratorium on evictions that the governor of Florida signed that put that moratorium for 45 days. And it's going to end around March the 17th, but May the 17th. So May the 18th is the Monday. So unless the governor extends it, right now, a landlord can't file an eviction for non-payment of rent against you if you don't pay your rent for what's now is April, but then May is going to come before that expires. However, your rent is still due, and once this moratorium expires, then a landlord could file an eviction against you for the entire sum of rent that you owe.
So let me just clarify for my thinking. So I can't be evicted before May 17th.
The landlord can't file an eviction before that date in Florida for non-payment of rent. Correct.
What happens on May 15th if I haven't paid my May rent?
So on May the 18th, which is the Monday, and we're gonna say if the governor's order isn't extended, that means that on that Monday, the landlord or the landlord's attorney can file an eviction on that date for non-payment. They would serve you with the 3-day notice, and then once those days expire, the landlord can file an eviction.
Okay. Thanks for that, Alicia. Kevin, maybe this is a question for you, or maybe you and Alicia tag team this a bit. So what does the Florida moratorium, that executive order, what does that mean for mortgage holders?
So I think, I might need some help from Alicia on this, but very similar to the stay on evictions, there's also a moratorium on any foreclosures. But as far as mortgage payments go, same thing as your rent. The obligation doesn't go away. You still do have to pay. But what the moratorium provides is exactly as it suggests, is you don't have, you're forgiven from that obligation for that period of time to pay, but it's still going to come due. And I believe, Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong, is that a 120-day moratorium or is it only 60?
The Florida is the 45, and then the CARES Act is the 120 days.
So yeah, for clarification, it's a 120-day moratorium. But and I want to stress this as much as I can. Every individual mortgage owner, regardless of what order comes out from the state of Florida or however whatever the CARES Act says, you must contact your mortgage servicer, whoever your loan company is, and set up that forbearance. You have to ask them for it. It's not automatic. And then you have to find out, okay, well, what's going to happen to that amount that I'm not paying during that time that covers the moratorium? Because that's going to be very important, because a mortgage can't be extended beyond the 15 or 30 years. So usually what they're going to do is they're going to put that amount on the back end of the loan. That's one option. They could give you different options, but I would urge everybody, again, keeping in mind what the CARES Act says, and what any Florida executive order says, call your mortgage company. Call them first thing in the morning because the hold times are long.
Thank you for that, Kevin. Let me ask for some clarification on the CARES Act. I heard both of you refer to that. What does the CARES Act mean for mortgage holders? And I think from what I understand, there's kind of two parts to it. So do you want to explain that to us?
Sure. So the CARES Act has a couple of provisions. One covers the actual monthly obligations as they come. And then, of course, as a lot of the audience members I'm sure know, every month that you're making a payment, that's something that's going to be reflected on your credit report with Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So let's say I call my mortgage company and I say, hey, the CARES Act says I can get a forbearance during this time. What is your company offering? And they tell you, we will grant you a forbearance for 3 months. So for those 3 months, under the CARES Act, you don't have to pay for those 3 months if your mortgage company grants you that forbearance. Now, if you are also current on your mortgage leading up to the period of time that the CARES Act covers, I believe it's March 18th, I'm not fully certain on that. But if you are current and then you get the forbearance, they have to report you as current during that entire period of forbearance. They cannot say you're in default. They cannot say you're 30, 60, or 90 days late, because under the applicable laws, that would be inaccurate. And then after that, you might have you might have legal grounds to have that corrected. So in a nutshell, that's what it covers: is you have a right to the forbearance, but again, contact your mortgage company. And then during that period of forbearance, your credit report has to reflect that you're accurate. That you're on time, if you were on time leading up to the forbearance.
Thank you for that, Kevin. Alicia, anything you wanted to add to that?
Just one piece to it. One is, I think it's really important what Kevin just said about the reporting to your credit report, that even if you're in the forbearance, that it's going to show you as current if you were current before you started. So I think that's really key for mortgage holders to understand that part. As far as the CARES Act goes with tenancies, it applies to people that are in subsidized housing. So like Section 8 or project-based housing and some other types, but also for landlords that hold federally backed mortgages. So a lot of tenants, we'll call them private tenants because they're just a tenant that rents a house from someone. They probably don't know what the mortgage is for their landlord. So they don't know if their landlord has a federally backed mortgage. So that's something to keep in mind with it. But it does offer that protection for the 120 days for tenants, that you can't be evicted from federally subsidized housing during that time, or from housing that is backed by a federally backed mortgage. So that's important for people to know. But again, that's going to put us into July. And keep in mind that, again, most tenants may not know what type of mortgage that their landlord has.
I think you're all up in my head, Alicia, right now, because sort of the next question that I had was, okay, let's say I live in subsidized housing, and during this crisis, I lost my job. What should I do?
Well, the first thing you should do is contact the housing authority that holds your voucher, or to the community that you're living in, where you would normally report your income when you do your recertifications each year. But so it's important to go report that loss of income to them, because your rent amount that you're obligated to pay is based upon your income. So if you go from, just to use an easy number, $1,000 a month in income, and then you go to zero, then your income would be adjusted based upon that. So it's important to contact the housing authority, notify them, and then complete any required paperwork for them so that they know you had a loss in income. And then the same when you come working again, is to then report your income that has come back, because you don't just get to stay at the zero for it. You would have to report when your income came back.
Thank you for that, Alicia. I think we've answered this, but I think it's helpful to kind of from the other perspective. So from the landlord perspective, perhaps I'm a landlord that really depends on this income coming in to pay for my own expenses. What rights do I as a landlord have during COVID-19 for renters who don't pay their rent? If I can't evict, how do I know that I can pay my bills?
I think it's important for landlords and for tenants to talk to one another, because communication now, even though we're socially distancing and may not be face to face, is still having that dialogue for it. As with any relationship, communication for it, and discuss it. Some of the options are working with tenants on rent assistance programs, because there are ones that are out there that will provide rent assistance to tenants when they've fallen behind in their rent, and landlords aren't always willing to accept that. So if you're a landlord and your tenant comes to you asking if you would accept rent assistance from one of the community partners here, then that is something you could work with them in order to get your funds paid, the rent paid for them. Another option is discussing with the tenant and finding out, okay, well, you paid last month in advance. Is it going to work better if we use your last month of rent for April or for May, depending on, kind of where you are with it, and having that discussion. Is that something that's going to work? Does the landlord want to do it? Does the tenant want to do it? So thinking about it that way, and keeping in mind, again, communication. And if you make any type of agreement, especially if you're going to use the last month of rent for April or for May or a coming month, is having that documentation in writing. And that's for both parties. That's for a landlord and that's for a tenant, that you guys agreed, and during the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, that we're going to use my last month of rent that was supposed to be for December or next January. We're going to use that for April rent or for May rent.
So just to clarify around that piece, if we can kind of unpack that one, if I'm the landlord and it sounds like it is an option for me to utilize that tenant security deposit or the last month rent for the current rent payment, I just need to have a written agreement, a conversation and a written agreement with my tenant. Am I hearing you right? Are there any other steps that I should take if I'm the landlord?
That is kind of the unpacked version for it. With the security deposit, it would be, I would caution, whether it was a landlord or a tenant, anyone in that position, is that security deposit is for any damage outside of wear and tear. So if you utilize that for rent in advance of the person moving out, then the landlord's taking a chance that they're going to have to cover costs for some type of damage, or the tenant's taking a chance if they owe some other fees or cause some damage, that security deposit isn't there as a security. But yes, if the parties agreed to use last month or security, again, in writing, but that could be something that is an option for them in the midst of this.
And it really goes back to your point about the importance of communication and the importance of relationship, which sometimes can be hard for us, right? I think sometimes it's hard in general to have conflict resolution between a landlord and tenant, and you add on the stressors of a situation like a pandemic, it can be really hard. But thanks for helping us kind of think through that. Another question that we received from someone: what happens if I'm a renter, but I don't have a written lease?
Okay, with that one, it is your tenancy itself under regular circumstances. There's not anything that's really different there. You have clearly had a right, it's an oral lease, or you had a written lease and it expired and you're just month to month. So those parts are all going to be the same. So there's not going to be a change either way, in the middle of the pandemic. One thing that it could affect is if you're applying for the rent assistance programs, like the ones that have been announced for the city of Fort Lauderdale, but other organizations that offer rent assistance, is there may be a requirement to have a written lease or for a specific term. That may be a requirement. So if you don't have a written lease, you may not be eligible for it at this point.
Thanks for that, Alicia. Next question: can my landlord change the locks or turn off the utilities if I don't pay my rent?
That is the number 2 question. I think I said number 1 was, do I have to pay rent? So I think, yeah. Number 2 is, can my landlord lock me out? Or, oh, I'm afraid, my landlord's going to lock me out or threaten to do so. So a landlord cannot lock out a tenant from their unit. It is prohibited by Florida law. If that happens, we routinely suggest that people call the police to tell them that their landlords locked them out or they had a right to be there. But it's important to keep in mind, because a landlord, even in a pandemic, must go to the proper channels of filing an eviction to have someone removed from the property, because they are facing a possible injunction if the landlord locks them out, and damages of 3 times the rent if they lock someone out.
Very good information. Can my landlord evict me? Well, we heard the answer to that, but what happens if my landlord moves in to some sort of action for using my apartment to host a family member during the crisis? I'm assuming that means like, hi, I have a lease. It says you can't have overnight guests for more than 2 days, and now I have a family member that I'm hosting during the crisis.
So the first thing would still be communication with the landlord. If you're going to have someone there, is to speak with them if they're going to be there more than what your lease allows for, because they may have a specific time that you can have someone else in the unit. So speaking with them to say, I'm going to have them here for the pandemic. It's someone I need to care for or other reasons. That would be the first thing. The second is some leases provide for an increase in the rent if the number of occupants increases. So if you have another resident added, even if it's short term, some leases allow for the landlord to increase the rent for that person being there. It is under general circumstances, if you have someone move in with you that's not approved to be on your lease, that's considered a lease violation. And your landlord could send you a 7-day notice that tells you that you're violating your lease by having an unauthorized person to live there, but they would still have to go through the court system to try to evict you. And under the Florida Supreme Court order, they're not entering defaults on evictions, and they're not issuing writs of possession. The 17th Circuit isn't issuing the defaults, and the Florida Supreme Court isn't allowing for the writs of possession to be issued to kick people out.
And Alicia, maybe this is an appropriate time. I know when you and I were speaking earlier, you were kind of explaining to me in layperson terms how one of the complexities of talking about this right now is there's different orders coming from different levels of the government or different areas. And so sometimes it can be a bit challenging. Do you want to talk more about that for a second?
Yes, I thought about it when I said that, when I mixed them up. But yeah, one of the issues that we face as lawyers and all of this coming in, and we work statewide with different organizations as well and attorneys across the state, but we get the administrative orders from the Broward County Circuit Court, so the 17th Judicial Circuit. We've had orders that come in from the Florida Supreme Court. There are the executive orders from the governor. There are the federal moratoriums, the CARES Act that we talked about. So there are all these moving parts, and they can be amended. We could get a new one. I mean, when we finish this, something else could come out and it's a new order that relates to something. So it's a lot of moving parts that we're all working as a team with Legal Aid and Coast to Coast, and then legal aid organizations statewide to try to stay on top of all of these moving parts so that we have the most up-to-date information that we can provide for our clients.
Thank you, Alicia. Here's another question that came in that we received. If someone in your building /duplex community tests positive for COVID-19, should the building notify other residents that someone has tested positive?
So that's a really complex question, but a landlord, whether it's a one-person landlord, small, or whether it's one of the large residences, they're not obligated to notify other residents that someone there tested positive with it. So that's something to keep in mind. They're not obligated to do it. What some landlords have done, kind of across the country, is announce the sort of things that they're doing, how they're keeping places clean, areas that are closed that are common areas, and those sorts of things. But there are some concerns that if a landlord notified other residents that someone tested positive, that they shouldn't really be doing that.
Thank you, Alicia. Kevin, I'm going to pull you back into our dialogue here. You were talking earlier about talking to your lender for mortgages and looking at mortgage forbearance. So we got a question here that says, as a personal homeowner, if I remodify my mortgage loan, does that change my interest rate and monthly payment? What's the difference between moving repayment of my forbearance to the end of the loan and remodifying?
So moving it to the end of the loan, that means it's essentially going to, if they're putting it on the back end, sometimes it's called a balloon payment. So whatever it is that gets deferred, let's say my mortgage is $2,000 a month, and then I'm deferring 3 months of payments, then $6,000 extra is going to come due at the end of the loan, or whenever it says your loan matures. What was the other part of the question? Could you please repeat that? Sorry.
So, the second part was the difference between moving repayment of the forbearance to the end of the loan versus remodifying. And then the first part of the question was, if I remodify my mortgage loan, does that change my interest rate and monthly payment?
It very well could. Whenever you try to work out a modification with your lender, if you're getting behind, the amount that you owe is not going to go anywhere. They're going to have to put it somewhere. So if they decide to put it toward, like I said, if they decide to put it towards the end, then, your payments may decrease monthly. Generally, I mean, from what I've seen, a modification, it could go up. I would say don't, when you see that, don't be surprised. The interest rate, it very well could go up, but during these times, unfortunately, a lot of us don't have, or there's a lot of people out there that don't have a choice. So, I mean, what you're trying to do is communicate with your lender, just like Alicia was saying, between landlords and tenants, you're going to have to work together. One thing that I would really stress, whatever you end up getting worked out or try to work out, have a pen and pad next to you, write down who you spoke to, whatever identifying employee number that they have, write it down, and then try to take some shorthand notes of what you spoke about. Because a lot of times, I think what people believe is that whoever they talk to, that information is going to pass along to the next person, to Sally, Susie, Joe, Jim, whoever. It's not always the case. Write down everything as far as who you spoke to. Whatever you decide, whatever you end up going into with your lender, if it's a modification, you could very well get a different interest rate. Could be higher, could be lower. Or they could add it to the back, of the loan. No matter what you negotiate and what you end up accepting, write down everything. Write down who you spoke to, as many details as possible, because that is going to protect you and your home.
That is such good counsel, Kevin. I need to do that in general with phone calls with people on things, is write down who I'm talking to. That is a really, really good advice, and write down that employee number. Thank you for that. Here's another question that came in. My landlord wants to enter my home during the COVID-19 crisis. Can I stop my landlord from entering?
Okay, so I'll take that one. And with that one, it's kind of the famous lawyer line, it depends for it. So if the landlord was just coming in for trying to come in and see your place, that's one thing, or coming in to check something that was a non-emergency, he would need to give you the requisite notice, which is generally 12 hours, but it could be something different in your lease for how much notice he would have to give you. But the second part to that is, if you have a burst pipe or some other emergency in your home, you're not going to be able to prohibit your landlord from entering the property in order to make an emergency repair. But on the other part, it's kind of, it depends on what it is that he's needing to come in for.
Alicia, while you're on here, let me ask you another question. what are the rights of a tenant when their rent includes utilities, but the landlord during this crisis stops paying the bills?
Okay, with that one, it gets a little more complicated, but it goes along with what we discussed earlier about not locking out a tenant, is that a landlord can't interfere with your utilities either. Meaning he can't just turn off your lights. It works the same way. Your landlord's prohibited from doing that because it'd be a constructive eviction. By doing so, because it makes your home where you can't live in it if you don't have electricity or you don't have water. So your landlord shouldn't do that. The one piece that I would say is kind of a little caveat is that if you rent a room from your landlord and you live in the same house, share the same electricity, and your landlord is also going without electricity, that gets a little more complicated because clearly he didn't have the money to pay for his own electric that was included in yours. But just to view it as a whole, for people that are renting, is that your landlord can't interfere with your utilities.
So if my landlord hasn't paid the bill and the utilities have been shut off, what do I do?
Well, I would recommend that you would contact our office to have that issue reviewed, really, because right now in particular with the COVID-19, trying to get that handled, because if you don't have utilities, we can look at that and see if that's possibly an emergency that we could get before the court for it if your landlord still refused to do so. But for those, I would say if your landlord has turned off your utilities and refuses to turn them back on, is to contact our office.
Thank you. And that's 954-736-2431.
Yes.
So some condo and apartment building associations are prohibiting move-ins and approval interviews during COVID-19. What should people do who are in the process of moving?
Well, one of the things to consider is that in this time of everything being shut down and social distancing, there are a lot of groups that aren't meeting. And that could be the case with some condo and homeowner association boards, is that they're not meeting during that time in order to review applications to be approved to live there. And if their application process includes an interview, they may also they're unlikely to be holding those interviews unless perhaps they're doing something like what we're doing, but it just may not be something that's available. Also, there could be a delay if they run background checks and credit checks. You know, so many things are delayed right now that it could be those sort of factors that are going into it. So right now it's kind of a waiting game all the way around.
So I just wait?
Kind of, yeah. So, I mean, if they're not allowing for the approvals, just based on what the rules and regulations are for condo boards, that would be something right now that, you know, you can contact them and find out which part is the delay. You know, is it because of an interview? Those sort of things. So take that action. I think our theme is really communication across the board, is finding out, you know, what is the delay? You know, is it because you're not meeting? Is it because you can't get the background check? Is it an interview? Those sort of things, because it can take a while just on a condo board for an approval anyway. Many of those can take 45 days with it. So again, the communication to find out what it is, but it could just be a waiting game right now.
And depending on your situation, that communication may involve your realtor.
Yes, it could, of course.
Kevin, question here, since we were talking about forbearances earlier. If I'm a personal homeowner and I'm seeking a forbearance on my mortgage payment, how does that affect my escrow payments for taxes and for insurance? I think you may be muted, Kevin. I'm going to unmute you.
There we go.
There you go.
Now, again, I think that's, unfortunately, sometimes you may not see how it affects your escrow until after the fact. So what I would keep a very close eye on is every month that you get a mortgage statement, take a look at how that's outlined to you. If you see any kind of negative escrow amount, that means something's going wrong that needs to be explained to you. So if you see anything negative and you think it's wrong, there's a way you can address it. So on the back of your, either it'll be on the front or the back of your mortgage statement, there's going to be a very specific address that says, send all written correspondence to, and it'll say what the address is. And you can send something called a notice of error. So what that is you basically just send it in writing and send everything certified mail, return receipt requested, but keep track of your mortgage statements. Look at how the escrow and taxes are being affected, because they may just do it themselves. They may put your escrow in negative without telling you anything. Okay. So unfortunately, this is something that you're going to have to kind of be hyper vigilant about. And let's say you get the forbearance, then every month, look at the statement. And if you see anything change, then look at the statement and find the address that says you can send all written correspondence or a notice of error to this address, send it certified mail, return receipt requested, and tell them, hey, I noticed this, I think it's wrong, and essentially please investigate it and let me know what you found. That's what they're required to do by law. And then within 30 to 45 days, in this case, I think it might actually be longer than 45 days because of reduced staff and whatnot, but they should send you something back in writing that says whether or not there was an error and whether or not they fixed it. Unfortunately, they may not. But if you document it, you're going to put yourself in a position to protect your home and not be charged any unauthorized escrow charges or taxes or insurance.
So here's sort of an unplanned question, but it's one that comes to mind. We've talked about rent payments. We've talked about mortgage payments. What if I'm part of an HOA or a condo association? I've heard about, what to do about my mortgage. What about HOA or condo association dues? How are those impacted right now during COVID-19?
As far as I'm aware, and this is going to be mostly different for association to association because they have something called the, I think it's their Articles of Incorporation. So that's basically all their bylaws that say, here's what we have the right to charge you. If you don't pay by this date, we get to charge you X amount of late fees. So the same thing that Alicia was saying before, communication. You've got to communicate with your association. The obligation is not going anywhere. So they very well will likely have the right to charge you the late fees that as they come due. Now, I think somewhere that one area where associations may trip up is the amount of interest and late fees that they're charging you. And that's going to be very specific case by case by case. But unfortunately, the short answer is the money's still going to be owed, but you've got to communicate with them. And getting a forbearance from an association, I mean, if there's anybody out there, then you have an amazing you have an amazing relationship with your association. But unfortunately, the obligation doesn't go anywhere. But you should definitely talk to your association, because I think the reality is some of the people on those boards are going to be going through the same issue. So I think it could get very precarious for them to try to collect against somebody else when maybe they themselves are not paying. So, I don't want to turn anybody into a Columbo out there, but just keep that in mind.
No Columbos.
Right.
And sometimes these answers are just hard. That's the reality. Is sometimes we don't get a nice, pretty, pat answer. We get some hard ones. Alicia and Kevin, be warned, you're going to have the follow-up here that I think you'll figure out quickly. If I don't pay my rent, can that affect my credit?
Well, so with that right now, because there's not an eviction action that can go forward on your rent, but as we've already said, rent's going to come due and you're going to have to pay it. If we look down the road, if you get evicted and you end up with a judgment for that eviction I like using round numbers because it's easier. for $2,000 for that judgment of the rent that you owed. Those judgments are reported to your credit just like any other debt, and it can sit on your credit report for up to 7 years. So that was a long answer, but the short one is yes.
Kevin, same question. If I don't pay my mortgage, how does that impact my credit?
So, as I said before, and I want to clarify this, when I was talking about the forbearances, those are for federally backed mortgages. That's what the CARES Act covers. And to try to describe what that is very quickly, if you have an FHA loan, if you have a VA loan, or if it's owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, you have a federally backed mortgage. So that's what the forbearance and the corresponding credit reporting covers. If you don't pay your mortgage, generally speaking, and almost all the time, yes, it is going to affect your credit. But as we said before, if you're proactive and you reach out to your lender or your mortgage company, your servicer, and you bring up the CARES Act and you say, and you ask them, hey, first, whether or not, if you don't know, you ask them, hey, do I have a federally backed mortgage? It's the first thing you need to find out. And if you do, then you can get that forbearance. If you're current when you ask for the forbearance, you'll be fine. The question is, I guess the other issue is, hey, what if I'm in default during the time that I asked for the forbearance? They can still report you as being in default during that time. The answer that I don't have right now, because this is brand new law and we haven't seen its effects yet, I don't know if they can tack on another month. So let's say if you go into it 30 days late, you get the forbearance. I don't know if they can then report you 60 days, 90 days, 120 days for the next 3 months. Because usually the thinking is, if I go into it current, you got to report me current for that entire time. So typical lawyer answer, unfortunately, it depends.
I give all three of you permission to give typical lawyer answers as you are lawyers. It's worse if I, as a social worker, do it. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions here. Alicia, if I'm served with an eviction case, should I file a response with the court? Like, what do you do?
All right. Yes, so it's really scary to have an eviction served on you at any point. So, and in the midst of this, I can see it being even more troublesome for someone. And the answer is that right now, the deadlines are not tolling. So there's not something there that's going to mean that you don't have an obligation to file one. But if you're served with an eviction, I would say the best thing you can do is call our office, because there are so many moving parts, like I've talked about and Kevin's talked about, is if you're served with court documents, is to call our office. Because again, even though there are these moratoriums, they haven't told the deadlines on certain things. So it would be important to call our office so we could review it and make a determination as to what's going to be best in your specific case.
So Alicia, as a follow-up to that, we had a question that came in that you may or may not be able to answer. And I'm going ahead and telling everybody, as I said at the beginning, they're not able to give individual legal advice. So, but in general, what happens if a lawyer e-filed into the court after the governor's order?
Well, we can e-file, at midnight on any day, those sort of things. The clerk can't enter defaults in certain cases. The Broward County Courthouse is only seeing emergencies as to what they've deemed as an emergency in their administrative order. So they are seeing domestic violence cases, family law, some children's cases, those sort of ones are moving forward on Zoom hearings, kind of like what we're doing right now, but with the court. So that's very innovative of them. But as far as it kind of goes, like, your landlord could still file it. It may or may not mean that it's going anywhere, and it may or may not mean that you've been served anything. So it's really, it may have been filed, but that doesn't mean that you got served with anything. So if you get served with something, that's the point when you would need to call our office, because it may just be sitting out there and you were never served with any type of documentation.
Thank you, Alicia. Kevin, let's imagine I'm a landlord and I'm also retired. So for instance, I live in a fourplex, I rent out these other 3 and I live in one, and I depend on that rental income to live and pay bills. We've talked a lot about if there's a mortgage that they can apply for forbearance. But let's say I don't have a mortgage on my rental property. It's paid off. I'm a retired active ager, older adult. So applying for forbearance isn't an option for relief right now. What do I do?
Well, if you're in that situation, I guess the only good part is you don't have to worry about them not paying you and you not paying a mortgage and then it affecting your credit. Honestly, that's that's very difficult, because usually the advice that I always give is usually on the other side. But honestly, I don't know the answer. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that one.
I've stumped you, Kevin.
Sorry?
I said I've stumped you.
Yeah. Hey, look.
Surprising.
They call it the practice of law for a reason. None of us perfect any of this. So, I don't know the answer to that right now.
Okay.
I think at that one, I hate to fall back on this one, but that's something that if you are in that situation, thinking of everything the way it is now, you're not going to be able to file an eviction because of the mandatory stay. The obligation's not going to go anywhere, as Alicia said, and as I've reiterated. So your options are going to be pretty limited, unfortunately. You're going to have to talk to your whoever. If you have a property manager, I would say definitely defer to them and have them handle it. Don't resort to any self-help remedies, because then you will be seeing somebody like me or Alicia. I would say that's it. Just make sure you communicate. But if you already own it, you're in a great position. But unfortunately, as to what you should do or what you can do, that's not something I'm used to advising on, unfortunately.
I hear you. Thanks, Kevin.
I think one thing, Christopher, would be kind of what we talked about earlier, is that if you have those tenants and they come to you saying that they're eligible for some type of rent assistance, if you're willing to work with them, that could be a way to get your rent paid by working with them that way. Or also what we talked about with using a last month rent or something like that could at least defer some of it at this point, would be another option.
That's good creative thinking. I think we're going to talk about in a few minutes, we're going to talk about some of the rental assistance that may be available for folks. But I think that's very good thinking here. Before we get into those questions on what assistance is available right now, I am going to, at risk of asking questions that you can't answer, ask a couple that also came in during this. Are there extensions to pay taxes on my house?
Yeah.
Sorry. Extensions to pay taxes. Again, I think you've stumped me on that one. I mean, that's going to be something that's going to go property taxes by county, by municipality, by state. Those are going to vary. I think just to be safe, you should assume, well, think of it this way: if that's in that's going to be part of your escrow, your taxes and insurance. So that's why it's going to be very important to reach out to your mortgage lender, because if you're paying everything all at once, then your lender's going to take care of that each month that you pay your mortgage. So if you get a forbearance, then it's going to affect that obligation for the taxes. So reach out to your lender, find out if your mortgage is federally backed. Again, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, USDA, alphabet soup, find out. And then if you get that forbearance, that should give you that relief for the tax obligation as well.
Thank you. Since we've referred several times to some of the rental assistance that may be available during this crisis, Alicia, Kara, why don't you share a bit about some of the resources that are available that may be providing rental assistance during this crisis?
One of them is, and a lot of people would have seen it posted because the city of Fort Lauderdale, their housing and community development, had posted the announcement that they're accepting applications for rent assistance. So they had received federal funds to provide that assistance. The city of Fort Lauderdale has determined that's the way to use the funds for that rent assistance. So that's one of the ones that has come out most recently for the COVID-19. Now there are other cities and the county that may be eligible for receipt of those federal funds, and we're trying to stay on top of it. But at this time, the cities that we've spoken with, they had not made a decision. Either they didn't know if they were going to get the funds, or they hadn't made a decision on how they were going to utilize them. So there may be more of those coming out in the future, but right now the city of Fort Lauderdale was the most recent to make that announcement. There are some other organizations in the community that provide for rent assistance, but it's kind of the ones that were already in existence with it. So the city of Fort Lauderdale is the newest one. There are family success centers that are countywide, and then some local organizations as well.
And Alicia, with the Fort Lauderdale Housing Community Development Assistance that you mentioned, is that a loan or a grant? Like, do I pay that money back, or are they giving me that money?
If you're obtaining the money for the rent assistance, then that's going to be money that's a grant to you. You're not paying interest, you're not paying back the money. We haven't seen any other cities that are utilizing it right now for mortgage assistance. That may come as something a little different or something else involved, but we just haven't seen that yet. But for the ones that are offering the rent assistance, it is a way to just keep you housed at this point.
And is that rental assistance paid to me or paid directly to my landlord?
It would be paid directly to your landlord, and the landlord would have to complete the paperwork, and there are other requirements that are in the application that the city requires. So they would have to go through all of those parts for it, which would include the landlord working with them in order to apply for it. And not everyone's going to get approved. I mean, that's one thing to put out there. There's only a finite amount of money, but those applications, are available at the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Perfect. And we will put links to these things. We've posted it before, but we'll post it again on Facebook and post it in the comments and post it afterwards. And you said you're not aware of any other cities or municipalities here in South Florida that are offering similar application processes for assistance?
In Broward County specifically.
In Broward.
Yeah, so West Palm Beach has moved forward more with theirs, but we practice in Broward. But yeah, so there are some that are separate from Broward County, but within Broward, yes, Fort Lauderdale is the one that we've seen the announcement, but we keep a watch on it and see, obviously we could, still miss it. So if you live in the cities or you're watching the county, kind of keep updated on what they may post on their websites or social media.
Thank you. One question that kind of pops up in my head, we've been talking a lot about the importance of communication between a homeowner and their lender, their mortgage holder, from a tenant and the landlord. The list goes on, this idea of relationship and communication. So let's say that, as the landlord, I attended this tonight. I was like, wow, Alicia and Kevin and Kara really convinced me of the importance of this. I'm communicating with my tenants, and we wrote up an agreement saying, you know what, I'm going to give you reduced rent for April. We're going to do it at a low rate for April so that you can pay it off. And we both sign off on that, like you said, have a piece of paper, we sign off on that. Does it revert back to the original lease once May or the next month comes around? How does that work?
It would be whatever is in the written agreement. If you said, I've agreed to pay $800 for rent this month instead of the $1,000, and then May it goes back to the same. It can be something really simple like that. So you could have that. All of the other terms in the lease would apply. If you're only doing it for that month, or whatever the agreement is, because two parties can make that determination of what they want to agree to.
Perfect. one of the things that we also, I know Alicia talked about earlier, is during a time of crisis like this, there's this increased risk of scams and fraud. Like we've probably all seen things posted on social media or emailed, or how can I protect myself right now?
Whoops. Sorry, was that a question for me?
Or for Alicia. I know that Alicia and I talked a little bit earlier about scams. Maybe that's a question for you, Kevin. How do I protect myself from scams?
I would be very suspicious of anything that you see come through a text message or an email. Also, I think during this time, there's going to be a lot of payday loan scams that are going to be out there. So anybody offering you, quick financial assistance at absurdly high rates, which you may not be able to see in the beginning. But once you get the bill, you see like, oh, wow, they were charging me 29% interest every week on this, $1,000 or whatever it was that they offered me. I would say look at anything very carefully before you decide to go forward with it. If it comes in a text message, and if it's a totally unsolicited email, there are these other programs out there that offer rental assistance that Alicia was talking about. Those are legitimate. Those are the organizations that you want to focus on. Private companies, very, very, very suspicious of that, and you should be as well.
So the random text I get from a company I've never heard of and a number I've never heard of that's saying they're going to pay my mortgage, maybe that's some BS?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I think some of the other ones that are going out there, medical scams for like vaccinations, tests, or treatments for COVID-19, it should come from a reputable source like the FDA or some other medical organization. Then there's also potentially price gouging is a scam. That is something that I think is specifically for the Attorney General, but they have a price gouging hotline. If you just Google price gouging hotline Florida Attorney General, you'll find their hotline. So if you see any of that, you should definitely report it.
Great advice. While I have you on here, Kevin, from what I've heard about you from your colleagues here, you're really, really smart guy when it comes to consumer related questions. And I think Kara referenced earlier that we want to take advantage of that expertise while we got you on the camera right now. So why don't I ask you a couple questions, because, as Alicia, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of what you were explaining to me before is usually if someone calls in with questions about housing, they also have questions about like my credit card or my student loans. And so let me ask you some questions about that, Kevin. What about my student loan obligations during this time? Do I have to keep paying my student loans? Am I going to be charged interest? How is that going to affect my credit history?
Very good question. Very important questions. And student loan debt, past mortgage debt, quite a while ago, and by quite a large amount. So the answer is based on whether or not you have federal loans or private loans. If your loans are federal, meaning they're guaranteed by the Department of Education, and you have to pay them back, whether they're federal or private. But if you have federal loans, you are automatically granted a forbearance until October. I believe it's whenever your next due date is in October. And you are not supposed to be charged any interest during that time. For some people, it was automatic. They didn't have to do anything. I have federal loans as well. And just to give you an idea, my servicer is Nelnet. A lot of people will remember some of these names: Nelnet, Navient, and whenever you think Navient, you should also think Sallie Mae, because they did become one. So if you have Nelnet or Sallie Mae or some other, or if you see it as just the U.S. Department of Education, you very likely have federal loans, but you should still contact them. Their communication with forbearances seems to be a lot better because you can do it electronically. At least that was my personal experience. So you should request it, and you should say specifically, you should say very unequivocally, yes, I was affected by COVID-19, and your student loan obligation, just like your the mortgage obligation that we spoke of before, if you're current, they should be reporting you as current. If you're in the process of getting your loans rehabilitated, they should still report you the same way. Unfortunately, if you're in default, there's no extra relief for people that are in that situation. But right now, if you got federal loans, it's supposed to be automatic. I think it's so for mine specifically. I remember I did it last month, so I did not have to pay April, and they told me I'm good for May, June, July, August, September. So the next payments that should be coming due for most people are going to be either end of September or bleeding into October.
Kevin, I will personally be logging on to Nelnet after this conversation to address my master's in social work loans. So this is welcome information, and I'm receiving it with joy. So thank you for that.
Excellent.
What about credit card payments? Can people get forbearance on credit card payments? And how does that forbearance impact credit?
So it's gonna go by individual credit card company. They don't have to give you a forbearance on anything, but you should contact them. I'll give you another personal story. Mine, Capital One. All my credit cards are with Capital One. So before everything kind of started getting a little uncertain, I made my next month's payment for April, and then I asked them, hey, can I get a forbearance? And then they said, well, you just made your payment, so you're going to have to wait until your next statement comes due, and then you have to come back to us to ask for that forbearance. So if you're like me, and let's say you paid just the very next month, you may get that same response. But if you haven't, and you're not able to because you're going through the same thing as everybody else is, I'm not telling anybody not to pay their credit cards, okay? But at a certain point, you have to prioritize your debts. We talked about rent. We talked about your mortgage, your utilities. Credit cards are unsecured debt, meaning they cannot come after your house or anything else that's your personal. They can't come after your house or evict you for not paying your credit cards. But it is going to come back at some point. You are going to have, who knows how they may choose to, to try.
I think we're live again. Our apologies for lovely technological difficulties. I think everybody's having some internet issues here in the Broward County region this evening. But we'll eventually edit these back together and repost a video link so that you can watch it all together. I think where we were when we sort of lost the feed is I was asking you, Alicia, for some thoughts. And I think you were really sharing some good information about specifically what was going to be happening or not happening with the governor's order and what happens May 15th, what happens after that. So can you re-summarize that for us so we make sure we have it on video?
Yeah, of course. I was just explaining that right now we are really in uncharted waters because we know what the governor's executive order is right now. We know what the CARES Act, moratorium is. It's, kind of what we've been talking about for the last hour. But what we don't know is what happens on the other end of it. Like when that expires, is the governor going to extend it? Is it going to stay in place and expire on the date he already has? And it's whatever happens after that are the parts that we don't know yet. And then like what Kevin was just talking about, with the garnishments and the taxes and other pieces of it is some things we're just working on because it's all new and we don't kind of know what's going to happen when it comes out. And for people to keep that in mind, and again, not as a way to scare anyone, but just we're all in this together with it, and we're working toward it, and keep those things in mind. And really, it's maybe it's a social worker sort of part to it, Christopher, but it's just keeping in mind like the social distancing, taking care of yourself and doing all of those things is really, that part is what we have to do right now.
Very good thinking. Kara, I think you were going to share some resources with us.
Sure, yeah. I am still here. Just wanted to reiterate what Alicia mentioned, that these are changing times. Every day there's new orders, there's new information out, there's orders that are expiring and changing. So everything that has been said, just keep that in mind. There is always new information. Stay tuned to whatever community resource that you're comfortable with, because I know Pride Center does the same, Legal Aid, we do post non-legal information, anything that might be, available to the community, whether it's food resources or more rental assistance. Alicia mentioned some. We personally at Legal Aid are applying for some of that from different grants. So things are changing. We'll have more information. We will post that information on our social media. I just sat back and listened to all of the information. I am not a housing expert. So I did want to say thank you so much to Pride Center, of course, especially Christopher for hosting us and making it happen so quickly, so we can get out this time-sensitive information. We had planned to do a big legal clinic in a couple of months, but in which we still probably will do that. But the information that our attorneys shared today is time sensitive. We wanted to get it out as soon as we got it. Thank you, of course, to Kevin and Alicia for taking the time to kind of make some sense out of the crazy times. It was very nice to see both of your faces and kind of feel connected to the outside world for a bit. I hope people watching kind of feel the same. Alicia said it too, we're all in it together. If you'll indulge me real quick, it's been a long night. I did want to plug some Legal Aid of Broward programs. Remind everybody our offices are physically closed. So many, but your legal team is absolutely still here and ready to help with your civil legal needs. We're getting calls every day, we're getting emails, we're getting creative. We're doing, Zoom chats like this with clients. We're talking on the phone. We are still operating. We have some quick contact guides that are up on our website, browardlegalaid.org. It's not necessarily information that's always there. It's, how to get direct contact depending on your legal need, whether it's housing or otherwise. Let's see if I can get technology working. I wanted to share a quick little slide with the info, so I'm not just spouting off numbers and info to you. Let's see. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. How about this? All right. Whoop. Well, I'm going to try to make it a little bit bigger because I know it's hard to see online. Or not. So I had it. So, all right. Everybody can see that? And not my face as much. So this was in part by the Rainbow Justice Project, obviously, which is Legal Aid, Coast to Coast Legal Aid. And it's through a very generous grant from the Community Foundation of Broward. They have Broward Pride. So I did want to share that with everybody. Let's see, some more information. If you're interested in more presentations like that, I do want to plug our survey. It's a really quick chance to let us know what else you want to hear about, what worked and what didn't. If you want something live where you can ask questions rather than doing it in advance, anything like that, please look at that survey link. It takes literally 1 minute to fill out. If you follow Broward Human Rights on Facebook, we post additional clinics like this. That resource page at Legal Aid is at browardlegalaid.org. And then if you have any additional questions, like I mentioned at the beginning, about any further housing advice, including like discrimination or something that we didn't touch on, then please email us. That email actually goes directly to me. You can email us, or you can also call our advice hotline, that 954-736-2431 number. I think that's about it on my end. I'll try to post that in the comments if I can. But again, thank you, Pride Center, for having us, and everybody that joined us today. I know it was a long evening, but hopefully it was worthwhile for everybody.
Thanks, Kara.
Yeah.
So I've kind of got one final question for the three of you. And it's something I'm asking lots of people these days, but I think it's helpful to hear different strategies. You know, we wanted to present information tonight to help lower people's stress, arm people, empower people with knowledge, and help kind of lower the amount of anxiety that all of us are carrying right now. So for you personally, what have you found has been a healthy coping skill during this pandemic, during this time of physical distancing? A lot of us have been removed from the normal things that kind of keep us in a good place. What have you found for each of you is a healthy coping skill or two that has helped? Kara, you can start.
Sure. So I guess kind of to go along with my joking celery comment, but I have been doing yoga, all these free online videos, and I know a lot of people are doing it. I'm a very stressed out person generally, and yoga is helping calm me. But another thing is using these platforms like Zoom, not just for work and intense things. I've actually had game nights with friends using Zoom, people that I haven't been able to see in a while, and it's really like this. It makes you feel connected again.
Well said. What about you, Alicia?
Well, let's see. I would probably say my biggest coping mechanism, but that's on a regular basis, even in the midst of this, is going to be running. That's a big part of my life, so I do that. And like Kara was talking about the game nights, I've actually had girls' night in where we use the Microsoft Teams, and did that with our development director, our deputy director, and our executive director, where we just all get there and we're like, okay, we're not talking about work, we're just gonna have a friend chat. And that's been really great to have that evening where we just talk about something that's completely unrelated to work for it. So, and like Kara said, that gives you a connection kind of face to face that we aren't all getting right now.
How about you, Kevin?
Along the same lines, I've been doing a weekly happy hour with some friends on Fridays, and same concept. You don't have that same, you can't actually be in front of each other and see the person's live, it's just, it's totally different. And I thought at first it was going to be it wasn't going to be enjoyable. It wasn't going to be the same, but we've been having a great time doing that. But outside of that, one thing that I've gotten back to that's kind of really helped calm me down a lot is reading. Not very exciting, not so much out there, but just doing that towards the end of the night, because if I've had a lot of anxiety at the end of the night. So you just you're thinking about so many different things and, the people you care about. So I've started reading myself to sleep, and just calming myself down that way. But keeping communication open in a fun way with people that I'd say should be as at the top. That's helped me a lot, and it's made me really cherish and look forward to that next time that I'm going to be able to see everybody in person.
Thank you for that. I do want to share, before we close out tonight, a reminder that Fort Lauderdale's Housing and Community Development Office is offering rental assistance to eligible Fort Lauderdale residents, and you can find those links on our Pride Center Facebook page. Couple of quick reminders. There is drive-through food distribution tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at Mills Pond Park, and they will provide food to the first 1,000 cars. And you can find information about that on our Facebook page. There's also free mask distribution for people that need that personal protection tomorrow at noon at Las Olas Shabbat Jewish Center on Las Olas. So you can check out that information on our Facebook page as well. As Kara referenced, there's lots of county and city services, so make sure that you're plugged into those email distribution lists. Things like Broward County Human Rights are hearing COVID-related discrimination, so know that's available. This Saturday, April 18th, is National Transgender HIV Testing Day, and our very own Pride Center's own Tatiana Williams will be one of the national leaders that will be on that. You can find out information on Facebook, and we here at the Pride Center continue to want to be a resource for you to provide opportunities to connect and opportunities to educate and inform yourself. So we're doing these kind of live videos regularly. Lorenzo Robertson is here on Monday mornings. We have coffee and conversation with Bruce Williams and all of our active agers and all kinds of community guests happening on Tuesday mornings at 11 a.m. At 1 p.m. on Wednesdays, our CEO, Robert Boo, has been updating us and taking us tours of the new residences at Equality Park, and Tatiana Williams is providing updates on Thursday mornings at 11. So just stay tuned to our Facebook page, stay tuned to the Facebook page of Legal Aid and Coast to Coast Legal, and we'll try to keep giving you resources and information during this. Again, I want to thank Kevin, I want to thank Alicia, I want to thank Kara for your time. This went much longer than I think any of us anticipated, right? Like I had no idea it was going to take this much time tonight, and we got tons of questions. And I know, Alicia, you've got like kids to feed, and I've got a 9-year-old to feed. I don't know, Kara and Kevin, who you're feeding. But I want to thank you all for being here with us tonight. Any final thoughts from you all?
I just want to say thank you again to the Pride Center for hosting this and doing the technical part of it. It's been great, and it was a bit on short notice, but really thanks to the Pride Center for everything, and particularly to you, Christopher. It's been great.
Kevin, any thoughts from you?
Yes, there's one excellent resource, a free resource that's out there that everybody should visit that explains how the CARES Act affects almost everything you can imagine: mortgages, rent, credit cards. It's a very simple web address. It's consumer.law. That's it. And it's put together by 3 very prominent consumer rights firms and lawyers. So if you visit that, and just it has a section for everything you could think of, and it's incredibly detailed. So if you feel like you feel like I didn't give you enough information about some of the things that we touched on, that one has everything you will ever need. So it's consumer.law. So please go visit that.
And Kevin, I hope you don't feel like you didn't give good answers. Like I sat here the entire time listening to Alicia, listening to you, listening to Kara, and just the volume of information that you all hold in your heads blows me away. I can barely remember to spell my name correctly these days. I have like this brain that is just fried by this pandemic, and your ability to pull up information and share it with us, I just find overwhelmingly impressive. What about you, Kara? Any final thoughts?
No, not really. I think that you all covered it all, thankfully, which is what I wanted, so I didn't have to speak much. But thank you again, everybody. I hope we can do this again. If there's interest, we are happy to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank our viewers. We had a big group. We had some technology problems. We have a smaller group now. We will somehow edit this and get this back out there so it's all one piece. But I'm very thankful to Legal Aid, to Coast, to Charmin, not the toilet paper, but the legal firm that allowed Kevin to be here tonight. I want to thank Nick Zantop, our social media and marketing coordinator, who dealt with all of the internet problems and Zoom problems and technology so that we could have this conversation. And I want to thank you, viewers, for being here with us tonight and for taking your time. Please stay healthy, stay safe, stay physically distant, but not socially distant. Make sure that you stay connected. So much this night has been about relationship and communication and connection, and we want you to stay connected. So thanks for being with us tonight.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you all.